All right, Hannah, you want to?
Okay, we'll go to the second one then. So the second one is from one of my favorite farms, and I'm going to say probably my favorite farm. It is Charlottesville, so Esmont, a little bit past Wineworks. If you guys can imagine where that is, it's about 15 minutes, 20 minutes past Wineworks in a little village town called Esmont. It started in 2007 by Gail Hobbs Page, who I hope many of you know, but if you don't, she was formerly a chef, and then she decided to make cheese, and she makes some darn good cheese. She's actually one of the reasons I work in cheese. I was dropped off at age 12. I think I didn't want to go to summer camp, or I don't exactly know. You'll have to ask my parents what provoked them to drop me off on a farm one day. And I was hooked ever since then. So she showed me her goats. She walked me through the dairy. I was able to help her package some of her cheese. I do remember eating more than I'd helped package. So I think that was good for me, not so good for her. But it really sparked my love interest with just local products, the farm, and products that are made with a lot of heart and soul. So that was when I was 12. And then fast forward to a couple of years ago when I was working in cheese in the States, I really wanted to connect to producers. And so I went back to Gale, and I was able to help during kidding season. So I came right when the baby goats were being born. I did not pull them out, but shortly after I toweled them off, did some bottle feeding and some of the 2 a.m. milking, the feedings for the babies. And it was just a really great way to connect with the farm, to see really why I do this is to see, the farmers, hear what they're doing, why they're doing what they're doing, and be able to share their products. So that being said, this is a new cheese from Gale. It's called the Caprino Caciotta, which means cooked goat milk cheese. And she actually went to Italy about 2 years ago with her husband, and they did like a cheese and food tour and visited some friends. And so this cheese was inspired by her time there. So if you'll take a look at it, it's definitely, a lot of you might, think of fresh chev, fresh goat's cheese as goat milk cheese, but this is going to be an aged version. This is aged over 2 months, and it's washed. It's washed in Albemarle Cider Works Nebbiolo vinegar. So it's local vinegar, local cheese, and what they do is they wash it twice a week in the beginning, and then slowly over the rest of the aging, the affinage, they wash it less and less. And basically that vinegar creates a beautiful rind, creates some acidity in the cheese, it balances with the goatiness, and really creates a beautiful round cheese. And we've paired this with our Chardonnay today because we wanted to pull out the pear notes and the yeasty notes as well as the grassy flavors in this cheese with the wine that's been done a little bit in new oak. And so we want that yeastiness and the oakiness to kind of play together. It's a beautiful textured cheese. So that also plays with the vivacity of the wine. And it all in all creates a really nice kind of harmonious fall themed flavor profile. If you guys want to try the cheese, take a look at it. It's going to be a little bit whiter than the last cheese. That whiteness is a characteristic of goat's milk. It's a little bit clearer than cow's milk. When it ages, it doesn't do that yellowness as you might have seen in our other cheeses. And it should be on the palate pretty earthy and grassy. I don't know if you guys are getting that. And it's just a really beautifully built cheese and super, super local. There's only a few dairies right around Charlottesville, so obviously whenever we can support them, especially cheese and wine, we love to do that. So we'll try the wine now with it.
Okay. Well, this was a tough decision between the goat cheese and the Comté for the Chardonnay that goes with both. We'll see. I recommend if you have the Chardonnay and the Comté as well, to save some and try it with that as well. But this worked beautifully because of the texture of this goat cheese. As Hannah said, it's a different style of goat cheese with a little more grit and texture to it. And I think it really pairs well with the barrel fermented, barrel aged Chardonnay that has a lot of texture and volume and layers. And I think the oak component of the Chardonnay really kind of blends nicely with the texture of the cheese. Aromatically, the Chardonnay, a lot of pear, some hazelnut notes, some of the vanilla notes, and some of the oak influence comes through. And maybe some of that might be a little bit heavy for the cheese. But I think some of the fruit notes goes really well with the cheese. But on the palate, I think overall it's a softer style Chardonnay, and this cheese It doesn't have a high amount of acidity, so I think it works well together. And yeah, it's a blend that the Chardonnay is all from a single, sorry, not a blend, it's a single vineyard Chardonnay. If most of you are familiar with our Wild Meadow Chardonnay, it's a vineyard that is located in Northern Virginia, 2 hours from here. And I've been making this wine now, well, 2007 was the first vintage, and it's a single vineyard, and it's really a distinctive vineyard. And I think what the Chardonnay is unique for Virginia because of its acidity, normal acidity. This vineyard has higher acidity when we pick it, when it's ripened. Because it's up in Northern Virginia, it's a cooler climate, cooler than Charlottesville, has lighter soils, so it retains a little more of the natural acidity. And I think that's important for food pairing, having a Chardonnay in Virginia that has some good acidity, has some crispness to it, that can handle the oak. Because of that acidity, you can balance it out. And I think it's a big, maybe a big wine for cheese, but with this type of cheese, I think it works.
Yeah, goat cheese is typically, it has, you know, it can hold itself a little bit better, especially if it's aged. So we're able to feature this, and it is, as I mentioned, a new cheese. So this is one of their first batches of making it. So it's kind of cool that we were able to integrate that into our pairing today. And hopefully a lot of you were able to get it, or if not, in the future, are able to try it.
I think for those of you know, the way these are all the wines that we're having from Virginia, actually are all 2016, which is unique for a Virginia winery. Most Virginia wineries, these are all the current releases from Wineworks. So we've had the right amount of bottle aging in these wines before we release them, and now these are basically 4-year-old wines, which are perfect for drinking right now. Both of these whites are really evolved and now are very expressive. And the Chardonnay will age for quite some time. I still believe it has 3 or 4 more years in it. The Odette is kind of another year to 3 years at the most. But this is, for me, what it's all about, is being able to have these wines, release them when they've had some age to them, and so they compare nicely with whether it's cheese or with a meal. I think that's really important. So this is kind of a good example of the Chardonnay. A 2018 or 19 Chardonnay right now would just be, too much for these cheeses. Any questions? Yeah.
Anna, can you expand a little bit on the washing process? Is it a soaking? Is it just maybe you cover it with like a paintbrush wash? How does it actually go, and how long does the wash stay on the cheese?
Yeah, so it really does depend cheese to cheese. So for this particular one, I'm not exactly sure what Gail does, but for a lot of other cheeses, they actually will take a brush, like a bristle brush, and just kind of scrub the cheese on each side to make sure that the liquid they're washing it in kind of reaches into the cheese and its porous parts and enters in. And then by washing it repeatedly, it forms its own rind. So for example, an Epoisse cheese, so it's a cheese of Burgundy where I am. It's a washed rind cheese, and they wash that in something called Marc de Bourgogne, which is a digestif. It's a very, very strong after dinner drink. It's an alcohol made from fermented stems and skins after harvest. And so they wash that cheese for 24 days. But in the beginning, it's a high concentration of salt water and a low concentration of the alcohol. And by the end, it's just the alcohol. So just over time, slowly, you're covering the cheese all over it. Again, I do think it's rubbed on. I don't think they're not soaked in the product. It's really brushed or rubbed to give it an even but a thin layer because it is done repeatedly, sometimes twice a day, and then over time once a week. It's a slow process, so it's not meant to go in all at once. It's meant to create color, to create firmness, and it's just a labor of love, really.
Other questions? Any comments about the pairing? Anybody like or dislike for any one reason?
Yeah, actually.
I got a say.
Well, Michelle, why don't you go first?
Yeah. Sure. I was going to say both the Morbier and the Cacciota, I think pair nicely with both wines for different reasons. So I think either, you could have either even crossed those for tasting, and both are very good.
Good. We like to hear that because I think pairing is pretty subjective. I mean, there are sort of rules and principles that are, that are followed, or there are guidelines based on, types of cheese, types of wine. But really it comes down to what you like. So it's cool that, you're able to have 4 wines and 4 cheeses in front of you to mix and match. And as my father said, trying the Comte as well with the Chardonnay, because that also is a traditional pairing. So that's a great thing to try. And this is just a fun experiment where, we've decided what we think works, but it also could be changed, and it could be, reworked. Just it's good products on both sides.
I wanted to say, it wasn't that I like the cheese. I like so far both cheeses very much, and I like both wines. I just thought that the first cheese and the first wine weren't the best pairing. I liked the first cheese better with the second wine. The second cheese I liked with both of them, and as you said, it's subjective. It's not, you can study and pass your tests and all that, and it's how does it taste to you at the time?
Exactly, and they bring out different nuances as well. So if you did the Morbier with the Chardonnay, you bring out more butteriness. You bring out the butteriness in the Chardonnay and the butteriness in the Morbier. So it really could go in either direction. You could bring out acidity and grass, or you could bring out butter and richness, and it could go either way. And when you do have such good products, it really, short of them just hiding each other, they really could go kind of mix and match in a really fun way.
Any other questions, comments? All right.
I was going to say, you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? I was going to say, it may come as a shock, but Holly and I, we tend to drink a lot of wine. And every time that we come back to your Chardonnay, it's always like going back home and realizing, maybe we just need to stick with your wine. But we do like the experimental process of checking out everybody. The Chardonnay is always so good.
Fantastic.
It seems to be a serendipitous event, but what was the reason that you dropped Hannah off at 12 years old at the farm?
Yeah, I do want to know that for myself as well. Not complaining at all, because 13 years later, I'm in France now selling cheese, but what was going on then?
I had the foresight. I knew the future. We needed you. I was in wine. We needed somebody in cheese, and you weren't able to drive, so dropping you off, you had no choice. You just had a
Foresight. Okay. All right. Let's see what Gail has to say about that.
She paid me, to eventually.
Really, after all the cheese I ate, I'm sure. I don't know about that. I think I'm still working off my debt to her for the consumption. I can help her with it.
Trust me now. All right. Next cheese.